Happy birthday, Josefina. A Springtime Story. Chapter 1. Spring Sprouts. Josefina loved spring. She loved the way it came swooping in like a bird on a breeze. She loved the way it woke the earth up from its deep winter sleep and made the rancho busy, a lively place. Baby animals were born in the spring. The sun stayed longer in the sky, and there were small green surprises here and there where things were just beginning to grow. Just now, Josefina had a surprise to share. She swung open the door to the weaving room and poked her head inside. "Tia Dolores," she said eagerly, "please come with me. I have something wonderful to show you." Tia Dolores looked up. The wind through the open door fluttered the pages of her ledger book, which was on her lap. Josefina saw that Papa was in the weaving room too. He was counting finished woven blankets, and Tia Dolores was writing the numbers in her ledger with her quill pen. "Oh, forgive me for interrupting, Papa," said Josefina.
"Well," said Papa cheerfully, "I'd like to see something wonderful too. I suppose our counting can wait, don't you, Dolores?"
"Of course," said Tia Dolores, putting down her pen. Papa made a little bow from the waist and held out his hand toward the door. Tia Dolores swept by him, and they both followed Josefina as she walked quickly across the courtyard to the back corner. "Just look," said Josefina. She knelt down and lifted a handful of dead leaves. Underneath, skinny yellow-green sprouts were sticking up out of the soil. Josefina lifted another handful of leaves, and then another, and every time there were green shoots underneath. "Sprouts everywhere," she said, "more than ever before. Pretty soon the whole corner will be full of flowers."
"See, it will," agreed Papa.
He sounded pleased. He put his hand on Josefina's head and smoothed her hair. Tia Dolores knelt down too. Josefina loved the way her aunt never minded getting dirt on her skirt or her hands. The sun shone on Tia Dolores's dark red hair as she bent over the sprouts. Josefina knew Tia Dolores was pleased too. These sprouts were a promise kept. Josefina's mama had planted the flowers in this corner. During the year after Mama died, Josefina had cared for the flowers as well as she could. Then last fall, Florecita, the meanest goat on the rancho, had torn up the flowers and eaten every last one. Josefina had thought Mama's flowers would never grow again, but Tia Dolores had promised they'd be all right. Now she turned and smiled at Josefina. "Didn't I tell you?" she said. "Flowers with roots as deep as these can survive a lot, even a visit from Florecita." Josefina grinned. "I'm still going to have to keep Florecita away from them," she said.
"Don't worry," said Papa. "Florecita will be too busy to bother your flowers this spring. She's going to have a baby very soon."
"Oh no," said Josefina, pretending to groan. "I hope Florecita's baby isn't like her. I don't think I could stand two horrible goats trying to bully me around." Josefina laughed along with Papa and Tia Dolores. She used to be afraid of Florecita. She wasn't the least bit afraid of the goat anymore, but she didn't like her the least bit either. It was cool that night. Josefina was glad she had left a blanket of dead leaves spread over the sprouts to protect them. And she was glad she had a blanket of woven wool spread over her lap, though the family sala was warm. Josefina and her sisters, Ana, Francisca, and Clara, were sewing blankets. Woven material came off the loom in narrow strips, which had to be sewn together to make one wide blanket. Josefina made her stitches strong and straight. All the sisters were good at sewing blankets. They had sewn many since the fall. Tia Dolores was adding numbers in her ledger. After a while, she paused and said, "Josefina, your birthday is coming soon, isn't it?" "Si," said Josefina. "I was born on March 19th. the Feast of San Jose. When Mamma was alive, we always had a celebration, said Francisca. She was Josefina's second oldest sister, and she loved parties. Well, I think we should have one this year, too, said Tia Dolores. The sisters looked up, delighted. After all, we have several things to celebrate, Tia Dolores went on. It's the Feast of San Jose. Josefina will be 10. Spring will be here. And, Tia Dolores smiled as she said, God willing, we should have quite a lot of new sheep by then. I've added the figures. We've made 60 blankets. That's enough to trade for 90 sheep, 45 ewes, and 45 lambs. That is good news, exclaimed Josefina. She and Francisca both put their sewing aside and went to look over Tia Dolores's shoulder at her ledger. Anna, the oldest sister, murmured a prayer of thanks. Clara, who was next to Josefina in age, calmly continued to sew. It's good, said Clara, but it doesn't mean we can stop making blankets. We'll need them to trade for more sheep. Oh, bah, 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 Francisca bleated at Clara. Don't be so tiresome. We all know that 90 sheep aren't enough to replace the hundreds that Papa lost in the flood last fall, but it's a good start. I think we should be very proud of ourselves. 60 blankets is a lot. I know we worked hard on them. Anna, Clara, and Josefina looked at each other and then burst out laughing. Francisca complained more than anyone else about working on the blankets. Now she made it sound as if she'd been responsible for them all. At first, Francisca scowled at her sister's laughter, but in a moment she was laughing at herself along with them. All right, she admitted grudgingly. The rest of you worked hard too. We might not have any blankets to trade if it weren't for Tia Dolores, said Josefina. It was her idea to turn blankets into sheep. All the sisters nodded and looked at their aunt with fondness. After the terrible loss of the sheep, Tia Dolores had suggested that she and the sisters and the other workers on the rancho weave the wool they already had into blankets and trade them for sheep. Now, just when spring lambs were being born, they had 60 blankets to turn into sheep. Papa will be pleased, said Anna. When do you think he'll go to the pueblo to trade the blankets for Esteban Duran's sheep? Asked Josefina. Esteban, Papa's great friend, was a Pueblo Indian. Soon, said Tia Dolores. She smiled over her shoulder at Josefina. Maybe you'd like to go with him. Tia Dolores knew that Josefina loved to go to the Pueblo to see her friend Mariana, who was Esteban's granddaughter. May I find Papa right now and ask him? Josefina said. Si, said Tia Dolores, who always understood Josefina's eagerness. Go, wrap your rebozo around you. It's chilly. Gracias, said Josefina. She gave Tia Dolores a quick hug and pulled her rebozo up over her head. She was just about to hurry out the door when an idea stopped her. Tia Dolores, she said, won't you come with me? You should be the one to tell Papa about the blankets and the sheep. Tia Dolores started to say no, but Anna and Francisca chimed together, saying, Go on, it is your news to tell. Very well, laughed Tia Dolores. She put her sewing aside, took Josefina's hand, and together they went out into the cool spring night. They found Papa in the goat's pen. He was sitting next to one of the goats with a lantern at his side. He glanced up when they came in, but he didn't say anything. Papa, Josefina began excitedly. Tia Dolores has good news for... Josefina stopped. She realized that the goat next to Papa was Florecita, but she had never seen Florecita like this. The goat was lying on her side, hardly breathing. Her eyes were shut. Papa, asked Josefina, what's wrong? Florecita had her baby tonight, said Papa, but she is too weak to nurse it. I don't think she'll live. Josefina looked down at her old enemy, Florecita. Living on a rancho, Josefina had seen many animals die. She knew better than to think of the animals as anything more than useful and valuable property. Still, as she looked at Florecita, the goat who had bullied her and poked her and torn up Mamma's flowers, somehow she just couldn't help feeling sorry. "Can't we do anything?" she asked Papa.
"I don't think so," said Papa.
Josefina let go of Tia Dolores' hand and knelt next to Papa. She stroked Florecita's side, but the goat didn't move or open her eyes. Her breathing grew slower and slower until it at last stopped. Florecita was dead. Josefina sighed. "Poor Florecita," she said softly. Then she remembered something important. She turned to Papa. "Where is Florecita's baby?" she asked. Papa lifted his sarape. Cradled in his arm was a tiny goat. "Oh!" gasped Josefina, pulling in her breath. Tia Dolores gasped too, and sank down on her knees behind Josefina. Very gently, Josefina reached out and touched the goat's silky little ear. The goat turned her head and nuzzled the palm of Josefina's hand. "Oh!" Josefina said again. The goat opened her eyes, and Josefina had to smile, because her yellow eyes looked just like Florecita's, but without the evil glint. Suddenly Josefina knew what she must do. "Please, Papa," she asked, "may I take care of Florecita's baby?" Papa's kind face was full of concern.
"The baby is very weak, Josefina," he said. "It isn't easy to care for an animal this needy. I think you might be too young for this responsibility."
"I'm almost 10, said Josefina. "Please let me try."
Still Papa hesitated. "You must realize," he began.
Then he stopped. Tia Dolores put her arm around Josefina's shoulder. Then, in a gesture so swift Josefina thought she must have imagined it, Tia Dolores touched Papa's hand. Papa looked up at Tia Dolores, and Josefina saw that his eyes had a question in them. Tia Dolores nodded. She seemed to know what Papa had started to say, and she was encouraging him to say it. Papa spoke slowly.
"You must realize that there is a good chance the baby won't live, even if you do care for her," he said to Josefina. "Think how you'll feel if you become fond of this little goat, and then she dies."
Josefina understood. Papa was afraid her heart would be broken, as it was when Mamma died. And for a moment Josefina was afraid too. But then she looked at the little goat, and all her doubts fell away. "I have to try to save Florecita's baby, Papa," she said. "When any of God's creatures is sick or weak, we have to try to make it better, don't we?" She held out her arms for the goat. "Please, Papa," she said. Papa sighed. Carefully, he put the baby goat into Josefina's arms. She held the soft, warm body nestled close to her chest and rubbed her cheek against the goat's fur. The baby goat gave one small bleat, closed her eyes, and went to sleep as if Josefina's arms were the safest place in the world.
"Take her back to the house," said Papa, "and keep her next to the fire. I'll bring some milk. She's too weak to nurse from one of the other goats. You'll have to teach her to drink."
He stood up and looked at Josefina holding the helpless, sleeping goat.
"She is yours to care for now."
"I'll take good care of her," said Josefina. "I promise." "That's Florecita's baby?" Francisca asked. "She's such a sweet little thing." "Very little," said Clara. "Puny, really. It's going to be a lot of work and worry to make that goat healthy and strong." "The poor motherless baby," said Anna tenderly. Josefina's sisters were gathered around her, staring at the baby goat, which was now awake in her arms. Tia Dolores poured the milk Papa brought into a bowl and placed it on the hearth. But when Josefina put the goat next to the milk, the little animal didn't seem to know what to do. "Here," said Josefina. She dipped her fingers in the milk and held them up to the goat's mouth. At first the goat seemed too weak even to open her mouth, but then she sucked the milk off of Josefina's fingers. "That's it," said Josefina. "That's the way." Patiently, Josefina dipped her fingers in the milk again and again, feeding the little goat almost drop by drop. Josefina liked the tickling feeling of the goat's rough tongue on her fingers. She was sorry when the goat fell asleep again before the milk bowl was empty. "Clara's right. Taking care of that goat will be hard," said Francisca. "But I hope she grows up to be as big as Florecita, just not as mean." "So do I," said Josefina, hugging the goat. "So do I." That night, Josefina and the baby goat slept on a wide bunk above the kitchen hearth, called the shepherd's bed. Shepherds sometimes brought orphaned lambs there to sleep because it was heated by the hearth fire throughout the night. The little goat slept curved like a cat, her legs tucked under her body, her bony head resting on Josefina's hand. Josefina woke up often during the night. She wanted to be sure she could feel the little goat's heart beating and the warmth of its soft breath on her hand. The little goat made it through the night. Before dawn the next morning, Papa brought Josefina a pouch filled with goat's milk. He attached a rag to the end of the pouch. Josefina held it to the baby goat's mouth. After licking it once or twice, the goat sucked on the rag and hungrily drank the milk out of the pouch. "Look, Papa," said Josefina. "Isn't she clever?" "Si," said Papa. He stroked the goat's head with the back of his finger. Josefina thought the goat was very clever to have figured out how to drink milk from the pouch. In fact, Josefina believed that Florecita's baby was a superior animal in every way, even if she was rather small. The baby goat grew stronger as each bright spring day passed. She seemed to thrive on warm sunshine, warm milk, and Josefina's warm affection. It was not long before the goat was following Josefina around everywhere on her quick, sturdy little legs. "She is just like your shadow," joked Tia Dolores. And so they all began to call the goat Sombrita, which means little shadow. Soon everyone was used to seeing Josefina and Sombrita together all over the rancho. Sombrita trip-trotted down the stream every morning when Josefina went to fetch water for the household. Sombrita tagged along while Josefina fed the chickens, which made the chickens cluck and fuss. The little goat chased Josefina's broom as if it were a toy, and sweeping were a game. She and Josefina played with it. She dozed peacefully while Josefina worked at the loom, and bleated noisily while Josefina had piano lessons with Tia Dolores. Josefina loved to look down and see Sombrita's cheerful face toward her, hoping for a quick pat, a hug, or a scratch behind one floppy ear. As Sombrita grew more frisky, Josefina had to keep an eye on her all the time. The rancho was a dangerous place for such a small creature. She might be kicked by a mule or stepped on by an ox. Josefina especially worried about snakes. Snakes were just awakening from their winter hibernation, so they were hungry. In the spring, a rattlesnake was quite likely to strike a baby animal like Sombrita and kill her. Josefina kept Sombrita close by, safe from harm. She had promised to take good care of the little goat, and it was a promise she intended to keep. Chapter 2. Tia Magdalena. One warm day, Tia Dolores, Josefina, and the sisters were planting seeds in the garden. Josefina used a sharp stick to make a hole in the earth. She dropped a seed in the hole, covered it with dirt, then patted the dirt in place. Josefina always liked to give the dirt an extra little pat to encourage the seed to grow. Josefina and her sisters tended their garden with care. During the summer, they'd carry water up from the stream every day to keep the earth moist. They'd pull weeds and shoo away pests. Then in the fall, they'd harvest squash, beans, chilies, pumpkins, and melons. "Oh, I'd love a big slice of melon right now," said Francisca. "Me too," agreed Josefina. She sat back on her heels for a rest. The earth was cool beneath her knees, but the sun was hot on her shoulders. "You'll have to wait until the end of the summer," said Clara. "We ate all of our melons months ago." "We were lucky to save as many as we did," said Anna. The same storm that had killed Papa's sheep had flooded the kitchen garden. "We'll harvest all we plant today, God willing," said Tia Dolores. She nodded toward Sombrita, who was bleating at the birds flying low near the garden. "Fierce Sombrita is scaring away all the birds trying to steal the seeds." The sisters laughed because the bold birds weren't the least bit frightened by Sombrita. The goat saw that she was the center of attention. She began to show off by kicking up her heels and bleating even louder. "Who is that noisy animal?" someone asked. It was Tia Magdalena, walking through the gate. She was Papa's older sister, who lived in the village. The girls and Tia Dolores greeted her politely. Then Tia Dolores answered her question. "That's Sombrita," she said. Her voice was full of fondness and pride as she went on to say, "Josefina has cared for her since she was born. The mother died." "We all thought Sombrita would die too," said Clara, who was always matter-of-fact. "She was so weak and pitiful." Tia Magdalena looked interested. She bent down and scooped up Sombrita. She stroked the little goat gently, and Sombrita settled calmly in her arms. Then Tia Magdalena looked at Josefina. Her soft brown eyes were warm. "Why did you decide to take care of Sombrita?" she asked. Josefina didn't know what to say. I didn't stop to think about it," she said honestly. I had to, that's all." "Has it been hard work?" asked Tia Magdalena. "Oh, no," said Josefina. "I love taking care of Sombrita." "You have done a good job of it," said Tia Magdalena. She handed Sombrita to Josefina. "Sombrita is a fine, healthy goat." "Gracias, Tia Magdalena," said Josefina. She was pleased to be praised by her aunt. Tia Magdalena was an important person in her family, especially to Josefina because she was Josefina's godmother. She was an important, respected person in the village, too. Tia Magdalena was a curandera. She knew more about healing than anyone else. People who were injured or ill went to her for care, and she always knew just what to do. Now Tia Magdalena turned to Tia Dolores. "Here are the mustard leaves you asked for," she said. "Tell your cook Carmen to brew tea from them and give it to her husband to drink if his stomach ache comes back." "Gracias," said Tia Dolores, taking the leaves. "Please tell her not to use it all at once," said Tia Magdalena. "I haven't many leaves left. Tansy mustard is usually blooming everywhere by now, but I haven't been able to find any yet this year." "I've seen some growing by the stream," Josefina piped up. "Your young eyes are better than my old ones," said Tia Magdalena. "Perhaps you'll gather some leaves for me?" Tia Magdalena tilted her head and looked at Josefina as if she were considering something. "And perhaps when you bring the leaves, you can stay for a while and help me? My storeroom needs a spring cleaning." "Oh, I'd like that very much," said Josefina. "Good," said Tia Magdalena. She smiled, and Josefina blushed with pride and pleasure. How nice to have pleased Tia Magdalena. The very next day, Josefina skipped along the road to the village, under a clean blue sky. She had a bunch of tansy mustard leaves in her hand for Tia Magdalena. Papa, Tia Dolores, and the sisters were going to the village too. Josefina had left Sombrita under Carmen's watchful eye. Josefina missed Sombrita, but she knew the little goat would only be in the way today. In the morning, the men and boys were going to clean out the water ditches, called acequias, while the women and girls replastered the church. And in the afternoon, Josefina would be too busy to keep an eye on Sombrita when she went to help Tia Magdalena. Most of the villagers had already gathered in the plaza when Papa and his family arrived. They called out greetings. "Buenos dias," they said. "Buenos dias," Papa replied. "It's a fine day to work, by God's grace." "It is," said Señor Sanchez, who was in charge of the water ditches. "Let's begin." He and Papa and the other men shouldered their tools and set off to work. Cleaning the acequias was a very important springtime job. Later in the spring, when the snow on the mountain tops melted, the acequias had to be clear of leaves and sticks and weeds so that the water could flow to the fields. Without water, nothing planted that spring would grow. "We'd better begin our work too," said Señora Sanchez. The women and the girls agreed. They took off their shoes, rolled up their sleeves, covered their hair, and tucked up their skirts. Replastering the church was another important chore. It was normally done later in the spring, but the weather had been so unusually warm the past few weeks, the women were replastering much earlier this year. Josefina was glad. As she scooped up a handful of gritty mud plaster, she decided replastering was a chore that was fun. "Watch out!" Josefina shouted at Clara, who stood between her and the church. Clara ducked down, and Josefina flung her handful of mud plaster at the wall of the church, where it stuck, splat, in a glob. Clara laughed, saying, "You'll splatter mud all over if you do it that way." Clara was neat. She pressed her handful of mud plaster against the wall. But even Clara was easygoing today, thought Josefina, as she spread the glob of mud over the adobe bricks so that it was smooth and even. The women and girls gossiped and chattered as they worked. The very oldest ladies sat in the shade keeping an eye on the babies. They called out jokes and encouragement to the others. Every once in a while someone would start a song, and everyone would join in. Voices high and low, in tune and out of tune, rose up from all around the church. Josefina liked making the church walls whole again. Later, she and some other children climbed up onto the roof to spread a new layer of mud plaster on it as well. Josefina loved the feeling of the mud oozing between her bare toes. It was exhilarating to be up high, closer to the huge white clouds and the brilliant blue sky. Josefina and the others shrieked with joy as they slipped and slid on the slick mud to tamp it flat. "Josefina!" Clara called out. She was standing below on the ground, looking up, shading her eyes with her hand. "Tuck your skirt up higher in the back or you'll get mud on it and look messy at Tia Magdalena's this afternoon." "And pull up your rebozo so it shades your face," Francisca added. "Your nose is getting as red as a tomato." Josefina looked down at tidy, sensible Clara and at beautiful Francisca, who was fussy about her skin. She knew that right now her sisters envied her. They were too old to be on the roof. "Almost 10 is a wonderful age to be," thought Josefina, exuberantly slooshing her feet through the mud. "I'm not too old to slip and slide on the roof, and yet I am old enough to take care of Sombrita and old enough to help Tia Magdalena." She waved to her sisters and cheerfully ignored their advice. "Bless you, child," said Tia Magdalena that afternoon when she saw Josefina at her door with the bouquet of mustard leaves. "Come in." "Gracias," said Josefina. She stepped inside and took a deep breath. Nowhere else on earth smelled quite the way Tia Magdalena's house smelled. It reminded Josefina of the way the corner of the back courtyard smelled when the sun shone strong on Mamma's flowers. But mixed in with the scent of flowers was the sharp, nose-tickling scent of spices and the musty, earthy tang of the herbs that hung upside down in bunches from the beams. Tia Magdalena smiled when she saw Josefina looking up at the herbs. "You'd like to know how to use them, wouldn't you?" she asked. Josefina nodded. wondering how Tia Magdalena had known. The mint leaves ease stomach aches. The pennyroyal brings a fever down. I use the manzanilla flowers to make a tea to cure a baby's colic, Tia Magdalena said, pointing to each herb as she named it. And speaking of babies, how is your sweet Sombrita today? She's very well, thank you, answered Josefina, grinning. She's very fortunate to have you caring for her, said Tia Magdalena. Her face looked merry. Tia Magdalena was much older than Papa. Her gray hair was streaked with white. But when she smiled as she did now, her expression was lively, and when she moved, her step was quick and light. Now we must do some work, she said. Come with me. Tia Magdalena led Josefina to the small storeroom in the back of her house. The ceiling was low and there was only one narrow window. But the room looked bright because the walls were whitewashed a snowy white, and the wooden table and door frames were polished until the wood was a shiny yellow. More herbs hung from the beams in this room. Along one wall there were shelves lined with jars of all shapes and sizes. Tia Magdalena tilted her head toward the jars. Here's where I need your help, she said to Josefina. Her eyes sparkled. Why don't we make a game of it? You lift a jar down from the shelf, look inside, and see if you can guess what's in it. I'll dust the jar, you dust the shelf, and you can put the jar back. All right? See, said Josefina. She reached for the biggest, most important-looking jar of all. It was blue and white china. Oh, not that jar, said Tia Magdalena. It's empty. It looks very old, said Josefina. Indeed it is, said Tia Magdalena. It's probably the oldest thing in the house. It's even older than I am, she joked. It's an apothecary jar. I don't know how it came to be in our village, but I know that it's been here for more than 100 years. The woman who was the curandera before I was gave it to me. She got it from the woman who was the curandera before her. Long ago, I believe there was a whole set of jars like it. That's the only one left. Tia Magdalena pointed to a smaller jar next to the blue and white one. Let's start with that jar instead, she said. Josefina took the smaller jar off the shelf and looked inside. It looks like pumpkin stems, she said. Could it be? See, said Tia Magdalena. You're sharp to recognize them. She dusted the jar as Josefina dusted the shelf. There's nothing in the world better for a sore throat, she said. You toast the pumpkin stem, grind it to a powder, mix it with fat and salt, and rub it on the throat inside and out. Josefina wrinkled her nose when she smelled the inside of the next jar. I think it's bear grease, she said. Right again, said Tia Magdalena. You mix it with onions and rub it on a person's chest to ease congestion. The next jar Josefina opened made her sneeze. Oh, that must be immortal, said Tia Magdalena, chuckling. It makes you sneeze and sneeze and sneeze. The more you sneeze, the sooner your cold is gone. Josefina enjoyed helping Tia Magdalena. Every jar had a story in it, because every jar held something that Tia Magdalena used as a remedy. There was dried deer blood to be mixed with water and drunk for strength. There was vinegar that was so strong it made Josefina's eyes water. It was used as a soak to stop infections. In another jar there was a terrible-smelling herb that was used to soothe aching joints. Josefina guessed what was in most of the jars, but once she came to something she didn't recognize. I don't know what this is, she told Tia Magdalena. That is the root of a globe mallow plant, said Tia Magdalena. I crush it and make a paste to put on rattlesnake bite to draw out the poisonous venom. She handed one of the roots to Josefina. Put that in your pouch and take it home with you, she said with a mischievous look, and someday ask if your papa recognizes it. Papa? Asked Josefina. Si, said Tia Magdalena. Once, when he was just a boy about your age, he was guarding the sheep. He tried to scare away a rattlesnake by hitting it with a pebble from his sling. He missed. The snake got mad and bit him. Your papa killed the snake with a rock before he came to me for help. That was very brave, but very foolish of him. If you don't get the venom out right away, it can kill you. She shook her head. I'll never forget the sight of him coming toward me, so proud of his own courage, and with that dead snake slung over his shoulders. Josefina put the root in her pouch and shuddered. She hated even hearing about snakes, but she liked to hear Tia Magdalena tell stories about Papa when he was a boy. Your Papa was always too fearless and too stubborn for his own good, Tia Magdalena said as she dusted a jar. And too quiet. But that didn't matter when your Mama was alive. She knew what he was thinking anyway. Josefina was surprised at how easy it was to talk to Tia Magdalena about Mama as they worked. Sometimes it seems so long ago that Mama died, Josefina said. Sometimes it seems like it just happened. And sometimes I'll see Mama in a dream, and it seems as if she's still with us. See, said Tia Magdalena. Her old brown eyes seemed to see right into Josefina's heart. That is how it is always going to be for you. See, said Josefina, running her cloth over a shelf to dust it. And for Papa too, I think. He's not quite so quiet and sad as he was just after Mama died. It has been better for all of us since Tia Dolores came. We needed her. Well, said Tia Magdalena, handing a jar to Josefina. Perhaps she needed you too. Josefina wondered what Tia Magdalena meant, but just then Tia Magdalena said, I think it's time for a cup of tea, don't you? And so Josefina didn't have a chance to ask. Chapter 3. Second Chances. When they were seated with their tea and some sweet cookies, Tia Magdalena said, You've done well today. Gracias, said Josefina. I was glad to help. She sipped her hot mint tea and gathered her courage to say what she was thinking. I've really enjoyed all this afternoon, she said. And I was thinking that I'd like to be a curandera when I am older. Tia Magdalena studied Josefina's face as she listened. Josefina was encouraged. Do you think you could teach me? She asked. When I'm old enough, I mean. I know I'm too young now. Tia Magdalena thought for a while. When she answered, her voice was kind. You can't simply choose to be a curandera, she said. You have to know which herbs cure which ills, and you have to be observant and careful. But more than all that, you must be a healer. A healer, repeated Josefina. How will I know if I'm a healer or not? You'll know, said Tia Magdalena. You'll know. It will be clear to you and to everyone else if you are. Josefina sighed. I hope I am, she said. You'll find out, said Tia Magdalena, in time. While Tia Magdalena cleared up after their tea, Josefina went back to the storeroom to finish dusting. All the while she was remembering what Tia Magdalena had said. How she wished there were some way to prove to Tia Magdalena that she was the right kind of person to be a curandera. Josefina looked at the big blue and white jar on the shelf and thought about how it had been handed down from curandera to curandera. The jar was dusty. Surely Tia Magdalena would be pleased if she dusted it as a surprise for her. Josefina stood on her tiptoes to take the jar off the shelf. She could reach it only with one hand. She tapped the jar to move it to the edge of the shelf so that she could lift it with both hands and crash! The jar fell to the floor and smashed into 1,000 pieces. Josefina's heart stopped beating. For a terrible moment she stood still, staring in horror at what she had done. Then, without thinking, Josefina ran from the room. She flew past Tia Magdalena, out the door, and ran away as fast as she could. Shame, shame, shame. The word pounded in Josefina's head with every step she took. Josefina ran without thinking about where she was going. Faster and faster she ran, out of the village, up the road to the rancho, toward the house, until she came to the orchard. She climbed up into her favorite apricot tree. Its branches were thickening with buds, but there were no blossoms to hide Josefina. How could I have been so clumsy? She thought. Tia Magdalena treasured the blue and white jar, and I destroyed it. Then I ran away. What a stupid, childish thing to do. Not like a girl who's nearly 10. I'll never be able to face Tia Magdalena again. Josefina clung to the tree, and hot tears ran down her cheeks. She had been sitting that way a while when she heard someone say, "Josefina?" Josefina looked down through the branches and saw Tia Dolores's face lifted toward her. Josefina felt as if all her bones had melted. She slid down from the tree right into Tia Dolores's arms and buried her face in Tia Dolores's shoulder. Then she cried and cried. Tia Dolores rubbed her back and let her cry. When at last her sobs stopped, Tia Dolores put a cool hand on Josefina's cheek and looked at her with sympathetic eyes. "Your papa went to Tia Magdalena's house to walk home with you," she said. "She told him what happened, and he told me." "Is Tia Magdalena angry?" asked Josefina. "And papa too?" Tia Dolores smoothed Josefina's hair and said, "They're sad and disappointed," Josefina finished for her. Roughly, Josefina wiped the tears off of her cheeks. "I broke Tia Magdalena's most precious jar. Then I made it worse by running away. I ruined everything." "Everything?" asked Tia Dolores. Josefina was so ashamed and miserable she could hardly speak. "I was hoping Tia Magdalena would teach me to be a curandera when I am old enough," Josefina said. "Now she won't want to." "Ah, I see," said Tia Dolores. "Can you tell me why you want to be a curandera?" "It's hard to explain," said Josefina. She put her hand on her pouch and felt the root Tia Magdalena had given her. "I like helping people feel better, and I've always wondered if there was a reason why Mama chose Tia Magdalena to be my godmother. Maybe Mama hoped I'd be a curandera." "You mean maybe she had the same hope for you that you have for yourself?" said Tia Dolores. She hugged Josefina and said, "You know what you must do right now, don't you?" "Si," said Josefina. "Sweep up the mess I made and apologize to Tia Magdalena." "And you must ask her to give you a second chance," said Tia Dolores. Josefina sighed hopelessly. Tia Dolores bent down so that her eyes were level with Josefina's. "Spring is the season for second chances," she said. "Didn't your mama's flowers sprout again? Didn't Sombrita get another chance to live when you promised to take care of her?" Tia Dolores smiled. "We're all given second chances. We just have to be brave enough to take them." Josefina hugged Tia Dolores. She hoped Tia Dolores was right. Oh, if Tia Magdalena would only give her a second chance, she would be so grateful. Tia Magdalena had only one thing to say after Josefina apologized. "The jar cannot be repaired," she said, but perhaps your hopes can." Whenever Josefina made up her mind to do something, it cheered her. She felt awful about what she had done at Tia Magdalena's, but she wasn't going to let her mistake kill her hopes. She still wanted to be a healer. Tia Magdalena had said that it would be clear to her and to everyone else if she was. She was determined to find out. Josefina kept the root Tia Magdalena had given her in her pouch as a reminder to herself. It was cold and rainy. It seemed as if winter had returned. But finally, just the day before Josefina's birthday, the clouds brightened from gray to white, and the sun shone. On that spring morning full of promise, Josefina set out with Papa and his servant Miguel to go to the pueblo. Papa and Miguel were leading mules that were loaded down with blankets. The mules kicked up a lot of mud, so the blankets were wrapped in cloths to protect them. The path to the pueblo wound its way next to the stream. The banks were dotted with wildflowers. In the trees above, birds sang loudly, trying to outdo each other. Josefina couldn't help feeling proud when she looked at the blankets. She had made some of them, and now Papa was going to trade them to his friend Esteban. Josefina had another reason to be happy. She was going to see her friend Mariana, Esteban's granddaughter. Josefina had tucked her doll, Niña, into her sash because Mariana liked to play dolls. And of course she brought along her faithful little shadow, Sombrita, to meet Mariana. The pueblo was 5 long miles downstream from the rancho, and after the first mile Sombrita lagged. Josefina had to pick her up and carry her. Josefina was relieved when the stream widened and the pueblo seemed to appear all of a sudden. It rose up between the stream and the mountains. The pueblo was made of adobe, just as Josefina's house was, but it was much taller than Josefina's house because several stories were built, one on top of the other. Ladders led from level to level. When Papa, Josefina, and Miguel arrived at the pueblo, they entered its big, clean-swept center plaza. They were greeted by small children and curious dogs. Sombrita was timid. She hid her face in the crook of Josefina's elbow. Esteban met them at his doorway. "Welcome," he said to Papa. "Gracias, my friend," answered Papa. "May God bless you." Miguel began to unload the blankets from the mules. Sombrita stayed with Miguel as Esteban led Papa and Josefina inside. They sat down by the fire, and almost immediately Mariana and her grandmother appeared with bowls of food. There were little pies with fruit inside, and cups of hot tea. Mariana didn't say anything, but she smiled shyly at Josefina, and her eyes had a welcome in them. Josefina smiled back. Both girls knew they shouldn't speak unless one of the grown-ups asked them a question. It wouldn't be good manners. As they ate, Papa and Esteban talked about the weather, their crops, and their animals. Papa told Esteban about the meeting the village men held to hear how much water each one would be allowed to use from the acequias. Esteban told Papa how much wool the spring sheep shearing had brought. Even though both men knew Papa had come to trade, they didn't talk about it. To begin by talking about business would be rude. Sometimes the two men just sat together in a comfortable silence. They seemed to have all the time in the world. But Josefina was impatient. She couldn't wait to show Sombrita to Mariana. Josefina tried to sit as still as her friend, but it was hard. At last Papa and Esteban finished their food. As Mariana and her grandmother removed their bowls, Josefina admired the way Mariana moved so gracefully in her soft deerskin moccasins. Mariana wore a beautiful blanket draped over one shoulder and belted with a woven sash. Her bangs fell to her eyebrows, and her dark hair framed her face. "My friend," said Esteban, "thank you for bringing the blankets." "Thank you for accepting them," said Papa. "I've brought 60. "Good," said Esteban. "When the sheep are old enough, I'll drive them to your rancho." Papa nodded. This was the way he and Esteban had always traded. Nothing was written. Esteban's spoken promise was enough. Papa said that his family and Esteban's family had always respected each other and traded with each other fairly. Josefina knew that this summer both Papa and Esteban were going to trade for the first time with the Americanos, who came to Santa Fe from the United States. Papa planned to trade mules, and Esteban would trade the blankets that Josefina and Papa had brought him today. "I hope trading with the Americanos will be a good thing," Papa said. Esteban nodded to show that he shared Papa's hope. Then Mariana caught her grandfather's eye, and he smiled. Both Josefina and Mariana knew that was a sign that they could go. They stood up eagerly and hurried outside into the sunshine. Josefina picked up Sombrita and held her to face Mariana. "This is my Sombrita," she said. "We call her that because she follows me like a shadow wherever I go." "Oh," sighed Mariana. Her eyes were wide with delight. She scratched Sombrita behind her ear, just where the little goat liked it best. "Will Sombrita follow us to the stream?" Mariana asked. "Of course," said Josefina. "Watch." As Josefina and Mariana walked toward the stream, they peeked over their shoulders from time to time and shared a giggle at the sight of Sombrita following right on their heels. When they reached the stream, the girls found a sunny spot to play. Sombrita curled up in the warm grass and went to sleep. Josefina took her doll, Niña, out of her sash. Mariana had a doll too, made out of corn husks. The girls pretended that their dolls were sisters. They made necklaces for them out of tiny wildflowers and boats from curved bark. They had just launched their boats into the stream when suddenly Josefina stood up. "Where is Sombrita?" she asked Mariana. "I don't see her." Mariana stood up too. The girls shaded their eyes and looked all around, but the little black and white goat was nowhere to be seen. "We'll have to look for her," said Josefina. "She can't have gone very far." She tucked Niña into her sash, and Mariana picked up her doll, and they walked along the narrow footpath that led downstream. Josefina hoped they were going in the right direction. She could still see the pueblo behind them, but it seemed to shrink smaller with every step they took. Both girls knew they should not be so far from the pueblo, but they had to find little Sombrita. They couldn't stop. The farther they went, the faster they walked, and the more worried they became. Neither girl said anything for a long while. Then Josefina spoke as if she were thinking aloud. "Sombrita's not lost," she said, trying not to sound shaky. "She's not lost until we stop trying to find her." With anxious steps, the girls kept going. Just after they'd passed around the next bend in the path, Josefina squinted. She thought she saw something black and white in the grass ahead. Could it be? It was. Josefina's heart lifted. "Oh, Sombrita!" she cried as she ran forward. Sombrita didn't look at her. The goat was staring at something else with friendly curiosity, as if it might be a delightful new plaything. When Josefina saw what it was, she stopped short. All her relief turned to horror. Between her and the little goat was a huge rattlesnake. Josefina swallowed hard. She felt sweat on her forehead and an odd trembling in her stomach. The snake was coiled and ready to strike. Josefina heard its eerie rattle. She saw its scary, skinny tongue darting in and out of its mouth. She saw the snake's beady black eyes in their sunken sockets. Josefina bit her lip. The snake's cruel stare was fixed on Sombrita. Chapter 4. Rattlesnake. Josefina, said Mariana in a low voice. She saw the snake too. Josefina signaled Mariana to stay back. She had only one thought. She had to save Sombrita. Ever so slowly, Josefina sank down and picked up a rock. She held it out behind her to Mariana. Mariana understood and silently stretched out her hand to take it. When their hands touched, Josefina whispered, "I am going to get Sombrita. Don't throw the rock unless the snake moves, because if you miss..." Mariana squeezed Josefina's hand, and then she took the rock. Very, very slowly, Josefina edged forward. She made a wide arc around the snake. Inch by anxious inch, she moved next to Sombrita, who for once stood still. Josefina stooped, gathered Sombrita in her arms, and straightened. Then everything happened so fast it was a blur. The snake gave a menacing rattle. Mariana threw the rock at it and missed. The snake whipped its head around, shot forward, and struck Mariana on the arm with its fangs. "Mariana!" cried Josefina as she saw her friend grab her arm and stumble back. Suddenly furious, Josefina put Sombrita down and snatched up a rock. She threw with all her might. The rock hit the snake in its middle. With one last sickening hiss, the snake slithered away so fast it seemed to simply disappear. Mariana moaned, sinking to her knees as if all the strength had gone out of her. She didn't cry, but her breath was ragged. Her eyes were shut tight. Josefina bent over her friend. "Let me see your arm," she said. Gently, Josefina took Mariana's arm in her hands. She couldn't help gasping when she saw 2 tiny holes where the snake's fangs had sunk in. The wound was an ugly, purplish color, and it was already beginning to swell. In her mind, Josefina heard Tia Magdalena's voice saying, "If you don't get the venom out right away, it can kill you." Josefina spoke with urgency to Mariana. "We've got to get back to the pueblo," she said. "We need help." Mariana tried to stand but dropped back on her knees. I can't go that far," she said in a hoarse whisper. Josefina's heart twisted with fear. She knelt down and something hard in her pouch thunked against her. It was the globe mallow root Tia Magdalena had given her. Without hesitating, Josefina took it out. She crushed the root between 2 rocks and spit on it to make it a paste. Then she pressed it against Mariana's arm where the snake had struck. She squeezed Mariana's arm gently to bring the venom up. Mariana whimpered, but she didn't pull her arm away. Again and again, Josefina pressed the crushed root against the wound. Again and again, she pressed Mariana's arm. Again and again and again. Josefina knew she had to stay calm, but she had to fight against a rising feeling of panic. The globe mallow didn't seem to be working. Mariana's arm was still swollen and bruised looking. Oh, how long would it take? What if she was using the root the wrong way? Perhaps she had misunderstood. What would happen to Mariana if the venom poisoned her blood? If only someone would come to help. But no one came. The minutes felt like hours. Josefina was just about to give up and run for help when, oh, at last, she heard Mariana take a deep, shuddery breath. Mariana opened her eyes, and color came back to her face. Josefina said a quick, silent prayer of thanks. Then she said to Mariana, "Do you think you can walk if I help you?" Mariana nodded. Carefully, Josefina helped Mariana stand. Mariana looped her good arm over Josefina's shoulder, and Josefina put her own arm behind Mariana's back to support her. "Lean on me," Josefina said. Then she turned and looked down at Sombrita. "Listen," she said to the little goat. "Now you must really be my Sombrita, my little shadow. Stay right behind me. Do you understand?" Sombrita seemed to. She stayed close to Josefina and Mariana every step of the weary walk back. Slowly, the two girls trudged along the path next to the stream. Slowly, they trudged up the long incline to the pueblo. Josefina knew they had been gone a long time, and Papa and Esteban would be worried. But she and Mariana could not move fast. Their tired feet dragged. Their tired shoulders drooped. They were only halfway between the stream and the pueblo when Josefina saw Papa and Esteban coming toward them. She had never been so glad to see anyone in her life. Papa and Esteban rushed to the girls, and Josefina saw their faces were tight with worry. Mariana said quickly, "A rattlesnake bit me," but Josefina knew what to do. She smiled weakly at Josefina. "Tell them," she said. Papa and Esteban stared at Josefina, but she was too worn out to explain. Instead, she held out her hand to show them the crushed root. "It draws the venom out," she said. "I had it in my pouch." Esteban's expression did not change. His voice was very deep when he said, "Gracias, Josefina. Gracias." He lifted Mariana up. Papa, Josefina, and Sombrita followed them back the rest of the way to the pueblo. Later, as they were walking home to the rancho, Papa asked Josefina to tell him the whole story of what had happened. So Josefina did. She didn't leave out anything, even though she was out of breath because she had to take 2 steps for every one of Papa's. They hadn't gone very far before Papa lifted both Josefina and Sombrita up onto a mule's back. After that, Josefina couldn't see Papa's face, but somehow she knew that he was still listening hard to every word she said. Josefina opened one sleepy eye. Could she be dreaming? It was not quite dawn, and yet she seemed to hear music. She sat up. Her sisters Francisca and Clara were gone from the room that they shared with her. Suddenly Josefina grinned to herself. She remembered what day it was, the feast of San Jose, and her birthday. Very slowly, the door to her room opened. In the pearly morning light she saw Papa, Tia Dolores, Ana and her husband Tomas, Francisca, Clara, Carmen the cook, and her husband Miguel. They began to sing, "On the day you were born, all the beautiful flowers were born. The sun and moon were born, and all the stars." In the middle of the song, Sombrita poked her head around the corner of the door and bleated as if she were singing too. Everyone laughed, and Tia Dolores said, "We wanted to surprise you with a lovely morning song, but I think someone forgot the words." Josefina picked up Sombrita and gave her a hug. "Gracias," she said to everyone, feeling a little shy at all the attention. "I liked it." The morning song was only the first surprise in a day full of them. Ana made cookies called bizcochitos for everyone to eat before breakfast. At morning prayers, Francisca showed Josefina how she decorated the family altar with garlands of mint and willow leaves, and how she surrounded the statue of San Jose, the saint Josefina was named for, with white wild lilies and little yellow celery flowers. Clara, who liked to be practical, surprised Josefina by helping her with her chores. But when it was time to dress up for the party, Clara had an impractical surprise for Josefina. It was a dainty pair of turquoise blue slippers. "It's about time I handed these down to you," said Clara. "I hardly ever wear them." "Oh, Clara," said Josefina, very pleased. She put the slippers on. They were only a little too big for her. "If you're going to be so elegant," said Francisca, "you'd better carry Mamma's fan." "And wear Mamma's shawl," said Anna. The four sisters shared Mamma's fan and shawl and brought them out only on very special occasions. Josefina swirled the shawl around her shoulders and looked behind her to see the brilliant embroidered flowers and the slippery, shimmery fringe on the back. She fluttered the fan and felt very elegant indeed. The party table looked elegant too. There was a beautiful cloth on it, and the family's best plates and glasses and silverware. Tia Dolores had made a special fancy loaf of bread. There were meat turnovers and fruit tarts and candied fruit that looked like jewels. But best of all, in the center of the table, there was a red jar with one small branch of apricot blossoms in it. Josefina smiled when she saw the perfect blossoms. She knew that Tia Dolores had cut the branch from her tree, the tree she liked to climb. Josefina remembered the day Tia Dolores had comforted her next to that apricot tree. "We're all given second chances," Tia Dolores had said. "We just have to be brave enough to take them." Soon music and laughter and happy voices swirled around the beautiful table. Friends and neighbors and workers from the rancho arrived bringing small gifts of dried fruit or nuts, sweets or chocolate for Josefina. Esteban and Mariana brought a wonderful gift. It was a melon that had been buried in sand since last fall's harvest to keep it fresh. When Josefina thanked her, Mariana said, "It's not much, but my heart goes with it." Papa quieted everyone. "Today is the feast of San Jose," he said, "and today my daughter Josefina is 10 years old. I'm going to tell you a story about her." Josefina felt Mariana's hand slip into her own. They both stood still, eyes shyly cast down, while Papa told the story of the rattlesnake. Papa began at the beginning and told everything that had happened. He described the snake in such a scary way it made everyone shiver. When the story was finished, Papa called Josefina to him. He handed her something that looked sort of like a shell. It was rattles from a rattlesnake. "I've saved these since I was just a boy your age," said Papa to Josefina, "to remind me of something I was proud of. Now I am giving them to you, because I am proud of you." Everyone clapped, and Papa leaned down to kiss Josefina's cheek. Josefina thought she had never in her life felt so happy or so proud. Suddenly Tia Magdalena was by her side. "Dear child," she said. Josefina smiled. She held out her hand to show Tia Magdalena the snake's rattles. "I'm going to put these in my memory box," she said. "They'll remind me of the moment when I found out something important about myself. I found out that I am a healer." Tia Magdalena smiled deep into Josefina's eyes. "See," she said simply, "you are." Later that evening, when the party was over, Josefina and Papa walked to the goat's pen together. They wanted to check on Sombrita, who had not been invited to the party. Sombrita was fast asleep. "It's so unusual to see her so still, isn't it?" said Josefina. She and Papa smiled, looking at the peaceful goat. "She is healthy and lively," said Papa. "She might not have been if you hadn't kept your promise to take care of her after Florecita died. You gave her a second chance at life. Papa and Josefina walked back to the house. On the hillside, the flowering fruit trees in the orchard were lit by the moon, as if a pale cloud had settled on them. The night air was cool, but softened by the scent of blossoms. Josefina took a deep breath. She thought the air smelled like apricots. Papa, she said, we're all given second chances. We just have to be brave enough to take them. That's what Tia Dolores says.
Does she? Asked Papa. Does she indeed?